I think people are starting to join. As you're joining, feel free to share where in the world you're joining us from.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, look at all the participants already.
I know, always so fun to see it right at the beginning. I love it. Omaha is where Devin and I are
Salt Lake City.
from too. Gabriel, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in San Francisco. Nice and foggy and wet this morning.
Oh, yes.
Ooh, Portland, my favorite city. Second to Omaha, one of my favorite cities.
I love Portland. Cities with bridges.
Yes.
Personality. Vancouver.
Love it.
So
It's the
fun.
UK.
Okay, little London moment.
A lot of enthusiasm from Kyle for Dallas. Hey, Ethan Averill.
The exclamation points.
So fun.
Yes, great. Well, also, let me share my screen actually, just to make sure that everybody knows where everyone knows that you all are in the right session. Is my screen sharing okay?
Looks perfect.
Okay, great.
Since you had a question in the chat from Amani, the participant cameras are on or no. The only cameras on will be all of the speakers today. So that's myself, Myella, and Gabriel for right now. So you all are good. I know I joined webinars. I'm in my cozy clothes. I'm on the couch. So yeah. And no, we are not in the same room, but we are in the same office. We have call rooms that look very, very similar. So yeah.
My thing stopped sharing once.
I just didn't get the memo to have a bright blue wall.
No, but you're good on that.
I did.
Totally good on that. Oops, my pitch just literally went. Okay, well, as I'm like getting this situated, we always start with an icebreaker. And I was thinking today we could start off by asking, what does looking on the bright side mean to you? So feel free to start commenting that, but I'll start with Devin. Would love to hear what looking on the bright side means to you.
Oh gosh. So this is one of our values here at Workshop, if you are not familiar. And I think for me, it's always finding those areas of opportunity to just be in community and like rally around like what brought us together in the first place, right? So even if we're dealing with a really difficult problem or like a speed bump on whatever it is that we're doing, it's like going back to this place of like, we're all here together. We're all trying to solve for the same thing. And that's what looking on the bright side is. It's not faux optimism, but it is really getting back to like, why are we doing this in the first place? So that's what really grounds my work here at Workshop and everywhere else in the world that I am.
Love it. What about for you, Gabriel?
A great question. I'm trying to think because I'm naturally pretty optimistic. My brain kind of just goes that way. So for me, it's actually been the opposite, where I've been having to learn how to be okay with the not so bright side. And I think for me, what's been really comforting is I forgot who I heard it from, but this idea that it can be both. And whenever we're going through tough things, it can suck, but it can also be an opportunity. I can be mad, but I can also be like relieved. Like there's acknowledging that there's a complexity of human emotion and it doesn't have to be binary is been a really interesting thing to work through and kind of get out of. But in general, I tend to look at the picture as half full. As Devin said, I love to look at it as an opportunity. Yeah, there's an opportunity there. There's something that can be tapped there, or that there's an opportunity for growth for me within that.
I love it. Yeah. And I would say for me, looking on the bright side is just like finding little opportunities. So I'm looking on the bright side this morning. So fun. I'm so glad to be able to be joined by you both this morning and be joined by everybody watching us live. So happy that everybody's here. I think I got myself situated. So let me make sure that my screen is actually sharing correctly now. Do we all see that okay?
Yes.
I see it.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll just get us started. So you may be wondering, why is it that we're asking, what does looking on the bright side mean to you? And that is actually because we have a conference coming up called Brightside. It is an employee comms and culture conference happening this September, so almost in a month, here in Omaha. It is a day where internal communicators, employee experience, all people that love comms and culture are coming together to listen and learn from one another. And we have delightful experiences, brunch, and some exciting surprises up our sleeve. In fact, if you answered what looking on the bright side means to you, you have automatically been entered into a giveaway to receive a free ticket to join us here in Omaha for Brightside. So if you haven't responded yet, keep on commenting, share what looking on the bright side means to you. And we're super excited today to be joined by some of our breakout session leaders that you will see at Brightside. So I would love to kick us off with introductions. Gabriel, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name's Gabriel Lamis. I'm a strategic communications consultant working for myself. That just happened to work for a company called Hola Gabriel. And I did that because my last name is hard to spell for people, but it's fun when I'm at conferences because people are like, Hola, and it's cute. I partner with organizations in a lot of different ways, but the things that really fuel me and energize me are specifically working on internal communications issues. So doing channel audits, channel strategy, channel communication strategy as well, and then also employee experience research. And that can bleed into a lot of different opportunities. That can be looking at your culture, it could be looking at your mission, vision, and values, and then also operationalize them through behaviors. But really, my favorite part of all that is getting to talk to the employees, talk to the managers, talk to the leaders, talk to the comms teams, and ask, what's really going on? Tell me. I'm a third party, independent. And then getting to synthesize all that and present it as a findings report and then help the comms team and the leadership really come out with actionable strategies that are right sized for the organization.
Love it. And Gabriel, what are your breakout sessions that you'll be leading at Brightside this year?
My breakout sessions, I need to pull them up because I already forgot. I'll be doing closing the feedback loop, building trust through listening communication. As I mentioned, employee research is a big area of passion and expertise for me. So really helping comms teams understand how to do that strategically and thoughtfully. And then also ready for takeoff, how communications can help culture soar.
Love it. Devin?
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Devin Owens. I am the communications manager here at Workshop. And so my work is really two things. It's certainly leading internal communications for Workshop. So that's a lot of what you all are doing in your day to day. But it also means flipping everything that I'm doing, well, just about everything, almost everything that I'm doing internally and making them resources for our growing internal communications community. So that's something that's really fun to do, is like to work really hard on like a strategy or a particular action item for the company and then making it a resource that's free and available to literally anyone in the world. It's such a great impact. And speaking of Brightside, my breakout sessions are going to be, the first one is going to be building your internal podcast. I would love to see in the chat if anyone is currently doing an internal podcast, if it's on their roadmap for 2026, would love to see that. And of course, if you're going to be at Brightside, like pop on in, like let's talk about podcasts. And then the next one is going to be comms for all, and that's going to be creating a culture of accessibility. I think when it comes, this is like really up Gabriel's lane. When we're talking about communications, we want to make sure that they're reaching everyone. And in order to do that, we have to apply a lens of accessibility. So I'm really excited to talk about both of those things at Brightside next month. I can't believe it's almost here.
So excited. And we're also going to be joined by Regine. She had a important stakeholder meeting come up. We all know how that goes. So she'll just be a couple minutes late, but she is the lead and internal comms and engagement lead, at Couchbase. And she will also be joining us at Brightside. And her topics are clarity as an optional, communication frameworks that scale trust. And she'll also be running a session on beyond the buzzwords, building belonging without burning out. And of course, there is me today. I am excited to be the moderator today for this fabulous group. And with all of that being said, just some housekeeping notes. All good. Please, we did receive your questions already if you submitted some. So thank you to everybody who did that. But feel free to throw out any additional questions you have in the Q&A so we can make sure that we are answering all of those. And while you're there, make sure that you're saying hi to Yanni. He will be in the chat, just making sure to answer any questions you might have. And he'll also, I'm sure, drop a link about Brightside in there as well, in case you're curious to learn a little bit more about what the day will bring. And make sure that whenever you are sending any messages in the chat to just toggle it to be to everyone. It normally starts with the just host and panelists. So make sure it's everyone. Keep the conversation going. And don't worry about taking any notes. We'll be sure to send the recording and the recording afterwards. I guess there's not any more slides other than this. So I am going to stop sharing my screen now. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Okay. And yes, okay, I'm excited. So we had created this list right at the beginning of some questions that we said we were definitely going to cover today. So I definitely want to make sure we get started with those. As we know, we're talking about making comms more human. So to kick us off, I would love to know how it is for you, Devin and Gabriel, that you are bringing in personality into your comms. and how it is that you think about it when you're writing something.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and jump in first. I think for me, it's communicating how I want to be communicated to. And for a lot of us, I think whether you went through like professional training or school, there's kind of that like unspoken rule that you have to be professional and it has to sound like this and it has to look like this. But we all know and don't want to receive communication that way. And so I think about when you're hired to do a job, they're not just hiring you because you can do it. They're hiring you because of the way that you do it. And so that's an opportunity to let like your personality and your voice shine. So the quirks and the things that make you unique, your speaking cadence, and the things that, bring joy or spark moments of interest for you are things that should trickle over into your comms, right? Now, this is going to look different, especially if you're doing like ghost writing or working across teams and departments. But I think it's really always trying to maintain that human touch. And if it sounds like AI wrote it, or if it sounds like a robot, I mean, I've seen it all, the robot with the thesaurus, like try to just make the language really, really plain and accessible for folks.
Yeah, I love that. I was gonna say the same thing, Devin. Actually, the biggest thing I think is learning to write more simply and encouraging people to write more simply. I was on an all team meeting for a client, and I think the word of the year is align because the person said the word align this and then aligning this, and then therefore we're going to be aligning that. I'm not even joking, probably 10 times within 1 minute. And I think really it's encouraging people to just keep it simple. It's going to be accessible also for people that English may not be their first language. If you're communicating with global audiences, it's going to be that more impactful. I tend to have a sense of humor. If you interact with me longer than, a virtual setting, that I usually have humor. So whenever I can, if I'm working with a client or when I was working in an agency and I had permission to inject some of that humor and it was encouraged, that was always really fun. But usually the thing about humor is it's very specific. There's nuance and there's stuff there that wouldn't have worked for global audiences. Sometimes that's okay, we're working with a North America only audience. So sometimes it's picking something really specific. So one of the ways that I was doing that was actually just doing cultural references. So if y'all remember the song Let's Get Physical, I had a call to action that was like, let's get quizzical. And just silly things like that, where it's just a little play on words and people that'll get it will get it. People that won't, it's not going to hinder or impact the way that they're reading that. And thank you for the laugh emoji recess.
I love that. I think, yeah, you guys obviously like touch on a good point of like keeping it simple, and we're already getting a couple of questions. How is it that you use that framework, but also making sure that you're not crossing any lines, whether that be, I know Nikita looks like she's talking about it's difficult for her in like government entities, or when you're just communicating something that is really important, how do you strike that balance?
Yeah.
I can start that
Okay.
one. Oh, go ahead, Devin.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I think it's one of those things that all comms are not going to solve all of the problems, right? Like there's different channels and there's different newsletters and there's different announcements that serve a different purpose. And so I don't think it hurts. Like if you are in a seat where the language and the work that you're doing is a little bit more serious. Like I used to work in higher education. Like sometimes there's just not space for jokes and plays on words. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a channel or a space that is for building culture and connection across the company. And so for that, it could be a Slack channel, it could be a Teams group, it could be a newsletter that goes out that just highlights like employee wins or happenings. So I think it's thinking beyond what are your current channels and cadences that you're sending out and thinking about how you can infuse culture in that if it's not quite the right fit. But Gabriel, I cut you off, so I apologize there.
Oh, no, you're good. I didn't even start, so it's fine. I think, yeah, what you're touching on, Devin, that I think is really important, and I know all our communicators in the chat know this, but it's knowing that there's a time and a place for that. So obviously, if you're doing a much more serious communication about structural changes, about leadership departures, whatever it may be, that's probably not the best time to try to bring too much personality. But I think the tenets of our personality that we can bring is we can try to still bring warmth. We can try to bring an approachability. We can try to bring an accessibility. We can bring a sense of empathy and really understanding of the people. And that can show up in so many different ways. But at basic core, what we're trying to communicate can still be simple, accessible language. And what was the other thing? Oh, and then what you were touching on with culture, I think one of the places that a lot of us have a ton of ownership is our newsletters. And, it's not just a plug workshop as an email tool, but I think the newsletter is one of the best places to really spotlight those human interest stories, to really bring more of the personality and to really just let, oftentimes our internal communication style is so different than our marketing communication style. So if we're already getting to do that externally and it connects with customers, and some of those customers probably became employees so they were attracted to your organization, why would we suddenly have a hard pivot and a hard switch once we go internal? And I think that's one of the ways you could try to make that case if you're worried about, confronting leadership. Although with government, yes, that's a different story. I think the biggest thing there is just incrementally moving people towards simpler, simplified, streamlined language versus trying to make it an abrupt change all at once.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Like, having to strike that balance is always really important. I think it takes, like, a lot of mindfulness, to be able to, like, strike that balance, and we actually got a really good question submitted before, this webinar from Christina, so if you're here, thank you for submitting that, Christina, and she said, like, "Often creating more human or personal internal comms requires more effort that, for example, a one-person internal comms team might not have." Do you have any suggestions for any low-effort ways to bring that human touch, to things?
Now I'm like, God, just
Now, go around looking the same thing. Go for it, Devin, please.
So I am a one person comms team here at Workshop, and I know that I am very realistic in what I have capacity to do and what I don't. And so that's where that cross departmental support is. I rely on that so, so deeply. And one of the first things when I was reading this question, Christina, that came up for me is we have an employee engagement manager here, Brooke. I don't know if she's watching. If so, hi. If not, she'll see this post recording. But she does a really great job of capturing moments, right? Because she's thinking all about the employee experience and how are they engaging and what's landing and what's not from like a day to day that I just as a person who is solely focused on communications might miss. And one of the cool things that she has is like a spreadsheet of like funny things that people say are these moments in time that happen at Workshop that would be really easy to forget as we're kind of doing like an end of year wrap up or even a monthly wrap up of like what has happened in the last couple of weeks. And so I say all that to say there's value in finding your people who can support the work and finding those intersections with internal comms. So I work really closely with our people ops team, which is where Brooke sits, but I also am on the marketing team. So I have a really great pulse of like, what are we talking about externally and making sure that employees are just as informed as our customers and prospects are. In fact, I would argue that they probably need to be more informed and earlier informed than those external audiences. So I always say, think about your cross collaboration and humans, we only got two hands. So think about how you can bring more hands to the table, that proverbial table, I don't know where it is, but to the table to help you think about the ways that you can make comms more human there.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Also, I'm a one-man shop as an independent consultant, and then partnering with teams to kind of augment support for them or scale things up. I think a lot of it is it's not so much the low effort way. More of the thought is it's making a choice of when you're going to try to rewrite something and when you're gonna, this is fine. It's more, is it my question when I'm looking at communication? Is this a stylistic thing that I would have written it this way, or is this a clarity thing where I can help clarify? And that can really help me be mindful of how heavy-handed I might be with some of the edits and the recommendations, because the client still gets to choose like, oh, actually, we do need it to be that way. Smart Beverly principles are amazing. Yes, Rachel Elkinson. I think the other thing too is if any of you are on Microsoft 365 and you have Copilot already, as your IT team has enabled Copilot, that is all strictly internal. If you have an internal GPT, ask the robot to help you. It's already gonna protect the confidentiality of whatever you're giving it because it already has access to everything else within your system. But just asking, can you rewrite this for me to make it simpler, to make it more streamlined, to make it whatever? Give it a prompt. A game-changing prompt that I learned at a conference for AI for communicators was actually to program standing instructions into your chat GPTs or your GPTs. So one of the ones I have is, please program in your standing instructions every time I give you a prompt, rewrite it to make it better, because AI knows how to talk to itself a lot better than we do. So I think giving it that standing instruction, then from there, if you have a comm that you're kind of stuck with or that you just don't have capacity for it because you're a one-person shop, plug it in, ask it to just streamline it a little bit for you. And then if anything, I think a lot of communicators, we don't love the blank page, but we do love editing something. So if AI gives you something to react to, you could probably whip it out a lot quicker than you would have if you had to just start from scratch.
I love that. Go ahead, Dad.
One other thing I would add Because I know sometimes when we talk about like getting that support from other teams, it's like, well, that's adding additional work onto their plate and they might already be strapped for time. So another thing that you could do is think about like, how do you get employee feedback? So that's like regularly surveying your employees and even just asking them, what do you want to see more of? What do you want to hear of? Do you have a coworker that you want to elevate? At Workshop, we just started a W's channel. This is something that we had previously been doing, but like managers were submitting W's. But now anyone across the company using Slack, it's an automation feature. You can quickly just write up a little W, like a win. Sorry, I'm using a win. That is what it stands for. It's something that anyone now can write up. And now that is something that we feature in our weekly all hands week over week. So I think thinking about the ways that you can not only ask other people that are doing the work alongside of you, but then asking employees too, what do you want to see? Who do we need to spotlight? And what do you want to hear more about?
Definitely. I love that. And I feel like you both kind of touched on the fact of like it is bringing in more people, whether that be, ChatGPT, like initially that is a tool for us all to be able to use, but also bringing in other people across the company and stuff. And we actually did get a couple of questions around this idea of that were submitted. And the question says, how to optimize internal. No, sorry. How do you help your leader find their voice and ghostwrite for them? They're a great tool to use for internal comms as well. And how do you argue for keeping their voice when central comm edits your messages? So how are you supporting other leadership to take a role in internal comms? And how can you help them create their voice?
I can start with this one. I think one of the best ways to obviously get to know your leaders is if you have a chance and opportunity to. I get to do this more often because I'm coming in as a client or not as a client. They are my client. Therefore, I have to meet them ideally. But just kind of get to know them and ask them just some key tenets. What is your communication style? How would people describe the way that you speak as a human? How do you describe the way you write? Obviously, also look at the way they've been writing communications. Ask them, are there leaders that you want to emulate? Are there people that you look up to that are inspirational or that you aspire to be similar to? It's just different questions to kind of get to the core of, what is the heart of their communication style? When I'm talking to people, I tell them like, yeah, I bring energy, humor, and humanity. That is my communication style. That's not everybody's communication style. But letting people know how I show up. How do you want to show up? How do you want people to think of you? Therefore, when we're writing your communications, how do you want them to also think of you because they're seeing things that are coming from you? I think the hard part is, yeah, if you have a central comms team, because maybe you're working with like a business unit leader and your business unit leader wants to communicate this way within the business unit, but central comms wants it this way. It's kind of dancing that line. And I think it depends on, is the communication coming from the leader? Like the leader's name is going to be signed to it. Therefore, it should have a little bit more of their personality where it's like, hey, this is the way the leader shows up. This is how they show up in the business unit meetings. This is how they show up in the all team meetings. We want there to be a consistency in how they're showing up, not disconnect versus, oh, well, this is just a blanket message from a nebulous body within, leadership. It doesn't have to be super specific. Therefore, we should follow Central's lead. I'm curious what Devin thinks.
Yeah, I would piggyback two things that you could do. The first is if you are doing any sort of internal podcasting, regardless of like what your equipment setup looks like. So it could be like actual microphones. It could be you all just jumping on like a Zoom recording and literally scraping audio from there. But I think it's just talking. It's like talking to your leadership, hearing how they're speaking, what they're talking about, like what they physically, whether you're in person or on screen, like light up about when they're talking and really just dig deep in there. I think that's been really helpful. And then the second thing would getting like a standing meeting on the calendar with this leadership people. One of the things that I do is regularly meet with our CEO just to like see what's going on from his perspective. What are some priorities that he has? And then whatever he's saying and sharing with me, I then kind of filter down through our channel matrix of like, okay, this is something that we need to announce in all hands. This is something that could go in his CEO Friday Focus email that goes out every Friday. This is something that could be a Slack message. So I think as you start to have those more regular touch points and really get to the heart of what are they trying to communicate and what is the sense of urgency behind it, that's when you can start to get a better sense of their tone. So I think for me, it's kind of starting with the what and why, and then you can get into the how you're communicating it later. Because really, I mean, all of us are leaning into support things with like AI or even just like auto assist and Grammarly and all those things that I think the tone is less of like trying to master a specific person and more about just being approachable and human collectively. Hopefully that's landing for folks.
Yeah, no, that's very good. We actually have a question from Erin. She just submitted this and she said, jumping off of the leadership topic, how do you keep exec leadership to stay on the message and coach them on the importance of prep and rehearsals for things like all hands meetings? It's all internal comms. It's all important. So how is it that how can we all be better at that?
I know that was withholding my reaction. Ah, how do we keep the human from humaning? How do we herd the cats?
Yeah, and it is really like that because, just as busy as our schedules are, theirs are too, sometimes 2x,
Times 100.
3x what ours are. And so I think it's thinking about those different ways that you can collect information and then filter it down through a matrix of like, what is the priority? What is most urgent? But I also think I dropped a survey, the link in there for surveys. I think if you can meet your leadership or your CEO with, hey, here's what employees are specifically asking for, whether it's they want to hear more from you or they want to hear more about this strategic priority or whatever the case may be. Usually when you can offer like, this is what they're looking for and they can meet a need versus say like, just talk more. And they're like, about what? Right? Especially because we don't want to assume that every CEO or every person in a position of leadership is naturally like this PR trained, great public speaker, because that might not be the way that they sort of rose up in their career. So I think if you can collect information and feedback from your employees and then meet your leadership with, hey, here's what they want to hear, here's what we really need to dive into, that gives them something more specific to target versus like talk more, do more, da da da. And it's like, of what?
Yeah. I think the other opportunity too with exec leaders is again, we want to tailor it to their approach, which yes, can mean a little bit more work for us, but they are the leadership. So we want as much as possible set them up for success and also show them that, we're not just here to just supply X, Y, or Z for you. We're really here to be your strategic partner, your strategic advisor. So I think even asking them, how can I best help you to stay within the talking points or to be ready for this? Are you more of an outline person or you just want bullet points? Do you want a script? And kind of then from there, kind of tailoring it to them. Do you like a lot of rehearsal? Do you want just like one touch pace? And different leaders will want different things, and that's part of the idea is that we want to really right size it for them. There's no one size fits all when it comes to leadership. So I think really getting to the crux of, hey, for realsies, how can I best help you show up and like crush it? What are the ways that we can set you up? In the past, what has worked really well, what hasn't worked well? If they're not sure, sometimes they don't know and ask them, can you think of a time that you had to deliver a message and it went really well? What were the pieces that led up to that? What was the time that things didn't go that well? What do you think contributed to that? Because that really helps you understand what the problem is. And then from there, how to best support them with what the opportunities. And it's more than anything, that's an opportunity for you all to shine and show up for your leaders, again, as that strategic advisor versus just someone that's there to spit stuff out or crunch out some comms for them.
Right. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, just as a reminder for everybody, if you all have questions, keep on pouring them into the Q&A. I'm doing my best to comb through these, but we can keep on going.
It's a very lively chat. I'm trying to like engage in our conversation, but I'm also super pulled into the conversation that's in the chat. But if you came for the live one, because you get to see all the questions.
Exactly. Yes. So Gloria asked how kind of pivoting a little bit. How do I handle internal comms during a season of change management in an organization? I think we kind of highlighted a little bit, about the transparency and stuff, but how are you keeping those comms human during that time?
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's interesting because I would say that businesses are always in a time of change. You're either hiring, teams are growing, there's movement. Unfortunately, sometimes there's, people are transitioning out of the company, products are launched. I mean, the list can go on and on and on of like micro change to more macro. And I think what I would say is just being in touch with the sentiment of employees, right? Gabriel gave a really great example of this earlier, where like if you are doing things where it's like, you're doing layoffs or things are happening, you want to like address that and be very thoughtful and very specific on, okay, here's what happened, here's why, and now here's what happens next. Because certainly the people that are sort of left over, if you will, have concerns and we want to address those versus like well, it'll just simmer out, it'll blow away. And it's like those sort of sentiments don't just blow away. So I think it's using, somebody in the chat said, using that active voice, being really proactive in how are we communicating, what are we communicating, and being honest. I think that's the thing that lands really well, is being honest when you can, and knowing that that communication doesn't always just have to come from the CEO. I think that's something that I see a lot. Managers are a great way to communicate information, whether positive or negative. I don't want to like harp on the bad here, right? Because we talked about looking on the bright side earlier. But I think managers are also a great way to communicate, especially with folks who are distributed frontline. Not every company, the CEO is like the sole talk piece, right? Like there's other ways that you can get that information. So I would just say really lead with like humanity and being present and aware of what the sentiment is at the time. And then again, that requires you to regularly collect feedback from your employees. We don't want to assume sentiment, whether good or bad. So you have to ask.
Love it.
All right, I'm chiming in on chat also. I don't know if you did it, Devin. I haven't done this in a while. I used to do a lot of events and virtual and hybrid events, but I'm a little rusty. I've been doing a lot more virtual only or in person only.
Doing
Um,
great.
I think the other opportunity too is, yeah, as Devin said, we're always in a period of change. So I might assume, and if you ask the question, you can let us know in the chat. And I might assume that you're going through tougher changes, like structural changes, organizational changes, potential layoffs, acquisitions, mergers, or that kind of thing, which are usually therefore what I'm hearing in the question is, how do we balance, levity with a lot of really hard things? I think Devin may have said this earlier. A lot of it's just reading the room. You don't want to just come completely off base with like, here's a newsletter, a day after and I'm sure none of you are doing this, but the day after layoffs, and you have this really light and airy, puffy newsletter that just feels completely, out of tune with what else is happening in the organization. I think one really great example that I can think of too during the pandemic, I forget which organization it was. Thank you, Gloria. I forget which organization it was that when they did their layoffs, I'm sorry, I said thank you, Gloria, because she said, yes, you're right. It's a process of layoff and restructuring. There was this letter from a CEO where he's like, we're laying off this many percentage of people in the organization, blah, 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 blah. And then immediately pivots within that same letter saying, but we are in the best position we've ever been. We have a really strong team. Da, 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 da. And it's like, wow, how are the people that just got laid off feeling now, where it's like, oh, well, it wasn't performance based, it was operational. Oh, but these are the best and the brightest that we now have left over. Or, that's an immediate pivot. And I think also, so thinking of that as you're structuring your communications, structure them a little bit differently, because obviously yours are going to be a little bit more spread out. I think the other thing that we really want to emphasize, especially if they push back with leadership, if they're wanting more levity, we need to hype up the room. We need to jazz it up. We need this. We need that. Is reminding people. I've heard this from leaders too. Like, can't people like we're still on this? Like, why are people still on this? Like, we've already done it. It's move on. It's like, well, yes, but how long were we planning these organizational changes? It's been, anywhere from 6 months, 9 months, 12 months in the making that you've all come to terms with this. You've all had to make peace with the decisions you had to make regarding your staff and your team. People here have had 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe a month. Like, they haven't had as long of a runway to kind of get themselves into that mindset of the change. And they're also battling that survivor's guilt, some of the grief of losing a colleague. And I think reminding leaders early and often that, true change takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. We need to really read the room and really understand where people are and kind of meet them there in the same way that they had to kind of meet themselves where they were to decide those changes to begin with.
Yeah. One thing I would add to that, sorry, Myla, I was going to say is this is not necessarily something I like learned, but it's something that you just have to sort of sit with, and it's silence. I think we like to fill space, not only as communications professionals, but just as people, right? Like when there's like that awkward moments of silence and like a conversation, you're like, oh, like, what do I say? What do I say next? And I think that there are some times where you just have to let the message simmer, again, good or bad. And we were just talking about this with the team earlier. Like, we have a goal of sending out, the biweekly newsletter and this every other week and this and that. And sometimes it just doesn't happen, and you need to let a message simmer. And I think in the circumstance that Gabriel was just talking about, it's like sometimes you just have to let that like rest on people and give them an opportunity to sort of like gather their thoughts, get their bearings, and then show up. Now meet them where they are. I think that's something is like we constantly think that we have to be pushing out comms to be successful. But I do think there's times when it's like, let's hold on this newsletter because it's not the right time. And then when we're ready, it's going to land much better with our employees because they're going to say like, hey, they didn't send out that newsletter that they normally do. It's probably because of X, Y reason. So I think just kind of sitting with things, it's not something we talk a lot about in internal communications because we have our calendars, we have our deadlines, we have people submitting stuff to us. But sometimes we've just got to take a beat and say, let's just sit in this for a minute. So
And one more piggyback off that, it's also more human and kind to you as an individual, because as much as, we're supporting leadership, we're supporting the organization, we're also still employees. We're still feeling the feels of whatever is happening within the org. So I love that, Devin. Why not create space for yourself as well?
yep, absolutely.
I love it. That is a really good point. And you're right, Devin. We were just talking about that earlier today, so it's always cool to see how that all connects. I'm going to pivot us a little bit. There's quite a few questions kind of coming in the chat talking about like having a diverse workforce. So Alicia specifically, she asked, do you have any advice on how to communicate more effectively and authentically with a diverse network of franchise owners, employees, especially those with varying personality types and levels of expertise?
I think whether it's global or national, like there's still going to be a lot of difference. Although culture has become a lot more globalized. It was a random thought I had earlier with like social media. I was thinking about when I was younger versus like the younger kids now and how much more global, even just words and slang that we use. I mean, granted, slang that I heard when I was in high school is now pivoting back and Gen Z loves it, which I think is really funny how cyclical that is. But I think when communicating with franchise owners, when communicating, just the people that are all around the world, I think part of them is them seeing themselves in the communication. So if your content, especially if it's your newsletter, if you can include stories of employees in those roles where they can see themselves reflected in the communication and they can see themselves reflected more broadly versus is it always just central that's being spotlighted? Is it always just central staff that's getting all the awards and recognition? I think also thinking about the ways you design your newsletter. Someone earlier touched on smart brevity, which I love smart brevity principles, but that's in that right there, one of the ideas is how you structure your content, how you include an in brief or a TLDR, too long didn't read. My favorite is bottom line up front, a bluff. It's like, what's your bluff? And part of that is, thinking of your leaders where your leaders may not have time to read the whole newsletter. So if you have in this issue at the very top and it has the headlines, and if they can just quickly like, okay, I have a pulse of what's happening just by reading that. And then people that want to read a little bit deeper. People were asking this question too about how long to make content. When I'm working on a newsletter, I like to make it relatively breezy, relatively snappy content, maybe 150 words, 150 characters, sorry, where it's kind of like a tweet, but then there's a link to click more. But the idea isn't always necessarily that I'm trying to make clickbait. I'm just trying to say, hey, if you only had 10 seconds to read, and this is the 10 seconds you could read, this is the thing I want you to know most. And there's the people then that also want to dive deeper. They want to know everything. They want to read all the things. They have the opportunity to then click through. So I think thinking of your content in sort of that hierarchy is like, okay, if people only get this much, this is the most important thing to deliver. If people want to get a little bit deeper, then they can get this. And the people that really want to go, and it's providing those levels so people can engage in the way they would like to engage. And then again, like I said, it's as much as you can try to reflect them, help them see themselves within the communication versus just like, we're this ambiguous body that's lording over you all with our comms.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would stack on top of that, I think that was like Snap's phenomenally answered, would be to not one channel can be the end all be all. You have to distribute that content or that information across channels. So if you're relying on a newsletter for a good chunk of that information, you have to ask yourself, is it also going out on like our two-way comms? So like an SMS, is it being sent out via text? Is it living on our intranet, whatever one that you use? Is it accessible to people through, Slack or Teams? So thinking about all of the different ways that you can meet people, right? We want to meet our employees where they are, regardless of where they might be. And thinking about like, sometimes you are going to have to duplicate, right? Like when we send out a newsletter, it always automatically goes to Slack. And it's interesting because more people access our newsletters from Slack than their actual inboxes, which tracks because of the way that we work day to day. So I would just say distribute, distribute, distribute.
Yeah, mileage. It's the term that marketers love, where it's like you create one piece of content and then how do you repurpose it and get as much mileage out of it as you can, especially with AI tools. I mean, now you can turn things into a podcast, you can turn things into a video, you can extrapolate from an all team meeting to make stuff shorter clips so that you can make them accessible. I just did a newsletter for a client where, they're talking about their fiscal year ended in July. They just started the new one and they're talking about the FY26 initiative. So we included a snippet from the all team meeting specifically about that, so people can just click directly to that and not send them to like, oh, go to this hour and a half long recording and go to minute 2200, whatever. But get as much mileage out of the content as you can, because different people want to digest it in different ways.
Absolutely. And I've also seen like a lot of people in the chat kind of talk about like segmenting. I think that that's also something that we should all be thinking about. It's like some things might only be relevant for a specific group of people. Make it only viewable to them. And a lot of those things can really come down to like the tool that you're using and making sure that you have that access to like those sorts of lists. And kind of going off with this question is Nikita asked, with like a workforce that does work different shifts and stuff, field workers, firefighters, all the things. How can I best find the time to share important information? And I feel like I could take a one quick stab at it and then I'll pass it along. But I do think for that, it's all about testing. Like just test the time of day. And again, that goes back to the tool that you're using. A lot of tools do offer the ability to see what time people are really engaging. But what's really cool is test it with different groups of people. Like if you know your firefighters are starting earlier in the day, try and send them an email earlier, see if that resonates well. And ultimately, like those sorts of things can help with making more informed decisions, I think. But I'll pass it off in case you guys have anything more to add.
Nope. Tools, testing, truly the tool that you have and being able to see those open rates, those click-through rates, how long folks are spending on a newsletter in particular is going to be paramount to sending out comms when it lands most for your employees. So perfect.
I think to the other thing I would add besides testing, I think somebody touched on this earlier, maybe it was Devin, but I think also just asking people. So doing a mini pulse survey. If you all don't have a lot of power to do surveying within your organization, but if you happen to own a business unit meeting, or if you happen to own the division meeting, or even get to run your all team meetings, something that I've loved that I've gotten to do with the client recently is that we actually started using Zoom poll feature, because it doesn't have to just be multiple choice. There's now room to do open-ended questions, but we ask 3 to 4 quick questions at the end of the meeting. We actually plan a buffer to end about 5 minutes early. So you can say, hey, everybody, would love your feedback on the meeting, blah, 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 blah. But we'll also sneak in like a comms preferences question in there. So we'll ask like, how engaged are you with the content today? To what extent do you feel like you have clarity on blah, 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 blah? And then, third question, which are your rank these channels that we currently use from most preferred to least preferred? And I think doing a similar thing with the different segments of where your workforce is distributed and just asking them point blank, like, hey, how would you like to receive communications? To get a sense of what the different ways are. You're not going to get a clear cut answer. Sometimes you will, but sometimes you won't. And at least that gives you a sense of, okay, these are the top 3 channels that people are using within this segment because they're desktops by nature, or they're completely desk, but they don't want to spend more time on their email. And then you can start to right size it for them. It's probably things you're already doing. It'll just let you optimize, and then you can start doing the testing that Devin and Mayela are touching on, that it's going to be so important. But with the Zoom polls thing, I think what's also really great is if you get pushback on like, are people have survey fatigue, or people have this, it's like, well, no, people are just tired of being ignored, and that's why they're not answering your question anymore. So making sure that you also follow up with, hey, last time we asked you all about this X, Y, or Z, we heard of this. So these are some quick changes we made to the all team meeting that you're going to see reflected today. And I think repeating back to people forget what you told them. We all know this in comms. People don't read the comms and people don't remember what you told them. So repeating early and often, again, that, hey, we heard this, therefore we did that.
I love it. This is so good. I'm loving all these questions. I want to make sure that we're being mindful. We have 15 minutes, so we'll do our very best to get to as many questions as we can here. I think, let's see. This one is a really great question. This is somebody asked, we partner with key stakeholders, leaders internally, and they contribute content. We do see the balance of where do you see the balance of editing and letting go? When it's external, brand and tone, needs to be perfect, but when it's internal, there's more wiggle room. So how are you finding that balance? I think that's a great question.
Yeah. This really gets to the human element of it. This is something that I think, again, so at Workshop, I'm internal communications and I sit on the marketing team. And this is something we talk about a lot, right? Because there's just a different review process that goes with when you are launching something externally. There's generally more eyes on it. If it's like a product thing, you're getting that cross-department sort of checks and balances of all of the things. And I would actually say that internal comms should be the same way, even if you are a team of one. Before any newsletter goes out, I have at least one other person like just read it, just make sure it doesn't sound crazy and I've not just been hunched over my computer for so long. But I think one of the other ways that you can address that is letting go of this idea that it's going to be perfect. This is really, I'm going to be so vulnerable. This is probably the hardest thing for me because I am a self-diagnosed perfectionist because I grew up and came up in this time that like, if it's not 100%, you don't send it. If there's typos, you fail. Like that is true, the little nagging voice in my head. And I've made so many mistakes as an internal communicator, but the fact of the matter is, and again, because I know, because I'm regularly surveying employees here at Workshop and I'm listening and I'm doing the listening tours and getting feedback, it's that people are just fine. That one little typo in the newsletter on October 7th, 2024, nobody's even thinking about it except me because it's sick that I still remember the date, right? So like we are overthinking it. And what makes comms human, I'm not going to make the association that mistakes and sloppiness and lack of process is human. I don't want to get that lost in there. But things are bound to happen. And I think the more that we can show our humanity in the way that we communicate. So again, it's that simple language. It's making it plain, being brief when you can. The way that we are communicating right now, this is almost what an email from me should sound like. Now, if you're writing on behalf of someone else, you want to sort of get closer to their tone, but it's like, why are we trying to sound like someone we're not? And I have verbal stutters and I say and I say and I think about that a lot too when we're doing our podcast because we don't want to just say that it's only for written communication. We also have video, we also have audio, we're showing up in different ways. And really, as long as the message is not lost in those like human moments, you are just fine. It is you truly that is your hardest critic. I don't know. That might have just been an affirmation for me. I'm seeing the chat come up, but
I
yeah,
love it.
we're coming up on that typo anniversary. Thank you for a month.
Yeah. I think I touched on this earlier too, where it comes down to a question of, is it stylistic and preferential? Like, am I making this choice for the edit because it's just how I would write it? Like, do I really need to change this? Or is this going to help them communicate more clearly and just sound more approachable, more human, whatever, accessible, whatever tone it is that you're trying to get across within the comms? I think within external, obviously, we keep a tighter lid on it because we want to present a unified front. But I think if the message is coming from them personally and it's, they have a byline as an author, whatever it is, I think it's okay to be a little bit more loose with it. People actually want to see usually the different, they don't want to just hear from leaders. They want to hear, or just from a single voice all the time. They love, often when I've done surveys and different, employee experience research stuff with, listening strategies, we hear that, we don't want to just hear from the CEO all the time, or sometimes we want to hear from the CEO because we never hear from him. But I think that's the opportunity that we have to really show the components, the humans that make up the organization, and we can embrace that as an opportunity. But yes, if something is just like way off, then make the correction, make the suggestion.
Yeah, so we're kind of coming up on time. I want to make sure. I think there's like a couple of questions here that can really tie us back to like making it human and also, finding some good rituals for internal communicators. I really like this question that Tyra had submitted. She said, what's your go-to ritual or mindset reset when you're stuck writing something human, but it keeps sounding stiff? Like, how are you centering yourself?
I walk away. From it.
Yeah.
My best moments of creativity, especially working on like tougher things for like values or like culture docs for organizations where something's just not clicking, is just walking away from the communication, going for a walk, like literally walking away, going outside, getting fresh air, getting some sunshine. Although I'm in San Francisco, the sunshine is very variable. But just getting some fresh air. And sometimes just, especially if I'm communicating about a change and I'm having a hard time, going back to just watching some of the marketing videos that the organization may have externally. So like I worked with pharmaceutical companies, and getting to watch their patient videos can be really inspiring. This may not be the case for all of you where you have something quite like that, or, working with a national nonprofit and getting to hear the impact on students, that kind of thing. But it kind of brings me back to, oh, this is the core of the organization. This is the heartbeat of what this organization, what these people care about. How can I bring that back to them? And I usually find that just taking that break, getting a snack for some hot Cheetos, whatever it may be, and just coming back to the communication can help me approach it more critically or more clearly. And I think the other thing too is sometimes going back to whoever was the original person that gave you the mandate or the notes or whatever it is, and just saying like, hey, like, what are you, and usually I would have asked this at the beginning, but it's like, what are you trying to say? Like, what success look like for this communication? If we could communicate only one thing, what would that one thing be? Because then that can help you, like, okay, there's all this mumbo jumbo, but what is the core of what I need to get across in this comm? And then how do I then, reverse engineer it and streamline it?
I would say, Myla, I actually got this from you. I go yap.
Yeah. Oh, by clocking me.
The folks in the chat who may not know what yap means, it just is to go talk. It's just kind of like that water cooler talk. You just chit chatting. But I think for me, again, being a team of one, it is so helpful just to talk to the people I'm communicating to. It can seem like such a thing that you have to like schedule and make so formal. I literally get up from my desk and I just walk and I'm like, I can bother this person right now. Like, let's just talk about something, whether it is what I am actually working on or just anything else. It could be about them personally, because I think part of making your comms human is knowing the humans that you are talking to, right? And if you only know your employees by their name, by their title, maybe by where they work, if they're hybrid or not, that is such a surface level understanding of what makes them a whole person. And so it's like, I want to see your first day of school pictures and I want to hear about your dog and what you did this weekend. And again, there has to be a balance of that because you can get into Yap City and it can be hard to get out. But just having a little bit of context of who I'm communicating with helps, right? Because it's also going to go back to the question of like, when should you even send out your email? If I know that majority of the folks that I'm communicating with are parents, I'm not going to send the email at 7:00. They're getting their kiddos ready for school. So it's like those little bit of like context can make a huge, huge difference and in communicating and making it really human, and even picking up on like the jargon that is within the microculture of your company. I talked earlier about how Brooke keeps like a running list of like the little funny things that people say or those moments in time that are so quintessential to workshop that I can include it in a newsletter and everybody understands what we're talking about. So I love a good yap, chit chat, whatever you want to call it, but like talk to people. And if you are remote, because I don't want to gloss over that experience too, jump on like a Teams call or again, another thing that Myla introduced me to, a Slack huddle. Oh my gosh. How have I not been huddling before?
I love a huddle.
Yeah, I love a quick huddle. If you use Slack, it's literally the coolest feature. You just jump on, you don't got to schedule anything. It's not on the calendar and you just chit chat and you can do it like it's in the corner while you're still doing your work. So just chat.
Love it. Erin, to answer your question, yes, the chat will be available after when we send out all the resources. Sorry, Gabriel, didn't want to cut you off there.
Oh, no, you're good. And I would say, and the other opportunity too is that our brains are still turning in the background. When I'm on this walk, sometimes I'm intentionally thinking about whatever it is I'm trying to do. And sometimes I don't. I just put on comedy or, watch a comfort TV show for a little bit. And same way if I'm talking to someone, because I'm a big phone call person. So I'll just call a friend and just chat. And our brain is still working in the background. And sometimes when I'm not trying to think about the problem, my brain subconsciously figures it out. And I'm like, wait, I'll be right back. I just figured something out. And that's the benefit. So I know a lot of us can be one person shops and we're like, we don't have time for this. It's like, you can make time because there are benefits besides just getting the thing done.
Love it. There has been so many good nuggets of information throughout this webinar. I would love for both of you to maybe give like one or two key takeaways that everyone can take with them at the end of this webinar, something that they can start implementing to make their next piece of comms much more human. What is something that you would offer for everybody?
I can offer an
Not to
affirmation.
put you on the spot.
Yeah, I can offer an affirmation. I think just the fact that you wanted to come to this webinar already speaks volumes of the fact that you're aware of this. It's in your mind. I think oftentimes what we're missing at workplaces, and as adults, especially in America, I will say, is a certain degree of self-awareness. And I think just the fact that you're self-aware enough about your communications and you want to make them better already speaks volumes. I think the things that you're currently doing right now are things that you should keep doing. So one, keep listening to people that are doing it, that they're in the trenches with you, because you get a lot from there. And then two, be in community with them. So like, as you've all seen, this chat is amazing. It might have been the best chat I've ever seen on a webinar, and I've done quite a few where people are just talking to each other and they're like answering each other's questions. So it wasn't just the value of hearing from us, But obviously, there's a ton of value from the almost 300 people that were in the room earlier. So I think make time for those communities. I know Workshop launched a community recently, and there's places like IABC, Ecology that are also membership based, and these are make more time for that. Connect with other people, just talk shop with them. We all know it's refreshing because it makes you feel a lot less alone.
Yes. And to your point, Gabriel, we do have a community channel. It's called Comms Chat. Yanni's going to drop the link below, and we would love to continue this conversation with everybody. It's a great way for us to have our own little Yap City, okay? And make sure that we can continue the conversation. There's been so many great questions, and we really appreciate everybody being here. And yes, like I said, Yanni just dropped that link. Go over, join us. He's going to make a post later today so we can continue the conversation. But Devin, I'll let you finish us up with something that you would get.
Yeah, no, this has been so fun. This is a new style of webinar format for me. If y'all have joined webinars that I've been on in the past, we have like our slide deck and we have our notes, and we certainly have a like very active chat. But this, we're just talking. And I think what is most affirming is seeing that whether you're a comms team of one or some, that we're really navigating very similar things. And so I think the nugget that I would leave folks with is knowing that what you bring to the work is why you are doing the work. I think sometimes internal comms is one of those job functions that can be a little like they're the uncelebrated hero. And so I would just say that everybody is doing an amazing job, to echo on what Gabriel said. Like, you showing up and committing an hour of your time to this already says that you are committed to really doing internal comms thoughtfully in a way that's intentional and reaching people where they are. I think that's huge. But then again, I would fall back on that last point of just reaching people where they are. So stay in community, survey often and regularly, be open to change, be more willing to get the message right than to get it first, or to stay on a cadence. Leave moments of pause. It's okay for there to be downtime and silence. I've like said 4 things. I know you only asked for 1, but I'm just trying to like get out as much as I can. Because truly, I think that the work that we're doing is so nuanced, and it's like if you work in internal comms, you get it, and if you don't, it's kind of hard to explain the work that you do. So yeah, I would just say leave space for all the things, and certainly take time for yourself too. So
Remember the human, whether it's the end receiver of your message or whether it's you as the person that has to help deliver that message.
bingo.
Love it. Well, Devin and Gabriel, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us. In case you all missed it, Regine wasn't able to make it. Her meeting ran longer. We totally understand things like that. Come
We've all
on.
been there.
Exactly. She's not alone in that. But thank you both so much for taking the time to share so much of these incredible nuggets with everybody. And to everybody that's joining us, thank you for taking the time. I know they said this, but dedicating an hour of your day to making comms more human really shows that it's something that you're thinking about, and you're already taking the right steps. And we appreciate you all so very much. And hopefully we get to see some of you at Brightside in a month. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. I think that's all. We're wrapped up.
Thanks, everyone.
Time. Have a good
It's
day.
delightful.
Bye-bye.
Okay.